Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome to my Waffle Square, where I obsess about things and you get to benefit from it. Well, in part 3 of our ongoing series where we are refurbishing this 2006 Land Rover SE with the 4.4 liter V8 petrol engine, we are going to be doing a deep dive into its transmission. And ours has the 6 HP 26 transmission, very common in the Land Rovers of this generation, as well as BMWs and Jaguars. So I am not a mechanic. I just dress like one for YouTube. So all you're doing is coming along with me to see what it is that we are going to experience together when we get into this transmission. So if you recall from the first episode, the previous owner said that the transmission was slipping between the second and third gear. I test drove the vehicle at the time and confirmed that. So it's going to be beyond a simple fluid change and a filter change. We're going to be going a little bit deeper, actually a lot deeper.
That's what she said.
So what all are we going to be doing? Well, if you were to take your Land Rover to the dealership, they are going to put it up on the lift. They are going to disconnect 2 of the engine mounts. They're going to jack up the transmission several inches so that they can pull the original pan and connected filter out of it. Otherwise, they can't get it out without jacking up the engine. That's going to cost a ton of labor, and that's why it's so expensive at the dealership. Well, a company called Atlantic British has come up with a brilliant idea, which is why not make the filter and the pan separate instead of one unit? By doing that, that negates the need to jack up the transmission and the engine several inches to be able to get in there and remove the pan. So Atlantic British sells this kit right here. You can go straight to atlanticbritish.com and check it out, or if you follow my link for Amazon, you can get the same exact kit, but if you're a Prime member like me, you get free shipping. So you will save about $17, I think it was. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is, since the transmission is leaking pretty bad, we're going to be removing the pan and the filter and all the fluid, and then we are going to go way beyond this kit. This kit is a filter that is not connected to the pan. It also, instead of the stock plastic oil pan, this one has a robust metal pan with 2 big, huge magnets that capture any bit of metal shavings that are going on in the transmission. In fact, when we take that other pan off, I can't wait to see what has stuck to the magnets on that pan. We also get a brand new gasket, and then specific transmission fluid for these transmissions. You can't just go to AutoZone or O'Reilly's and buy off-the-shelf transmission fluid. These are very touchy transmissions. They need this ZF fluid. It's a specific transmission fluid that comes in the Atlantic British kit. You also have the sleeve that the electronics package goes into to mate with the electronics inside of the transmission, and you get brand new mounting bolts to go all the way around the perimeter of the transmission. Now, if all you're wanting to do is this fluid filter and sleeve change, you might want to just go to Atlantic British's YouTube channel. There's a link right here, and watch theirs. I did, it's great. But we are going way beyond that, because this is no guarantee to fix the issue we're having. In fact, it probably won't. There are some cases where a new filter and fluid change can solve a lot of your problems, but since we're going to have all this torn open, I'm going way beyond this simple kit. There is a website that I will put in the description below for a California transmission company that has very specific parts for your transmission. Now, when you get to this website, you're going to need to find out exactly what type of transmission, in our case the 6 HP 26, But then there's also a Stückel number. And Stückel in German means pieces. So maybe like a parts or model number is what it means. But here is how you find that specific number you're going to need.
All right, so let's get our bearings. This is the heat shield for the transmission oil pan. This direction is the front of the vehicle. This direction is aft. Right behind this heat shield is a crossing exhaust pipe. You want to rest against the exhaust pipe and go in between the drive shaft right here and this heat shield on the driver's side of the transmission here in America. You go up there and you will find that tag with your scope.
All right, so when I got under there with that little scope, and I wish I could recommend it, but it overheats really quickly and then starts to stutter. It's not good. In fact, I couldn't even get video of me getting that. I had to take some screenshots because it was hiccuping so bad. So it's a terrible little overheating device. But it did get me the number, which is, as you can see in this series here, 1068 and then 020069. So I went on the website, and as you see in this picture, I confirmed that this specific number coincided with this kit right here. Now this is what's going to make the difference in our transmission. It is, very importantly, all new solenoids. So when you remove that pan and you look underneath that pan, the first thing you're going to see is the Mechatronic unit. It actually looks like Zamfir's pan flute.
You've heard his hauntingly beautiful music in movies, on radio and TV. He's sold over 20 million records round the world. His name is Zamfir, master of the pan flute.
But rather than making beautiful music, it handles all the shifting. So we get all new solenoids. And then in one of the BMW transmission repair videos that I watched, the repairman said that these two items here, which are seals for that Mechatronics unit, these are, in his opinion, just as important and maybe more so than changing the solenoids. We're going to do both. So all of that, in addition to getting in with the GAP tool and clearing the codes of how the computer has been shifting the engine with the issues it's having, and letting the computer reset how it shifts over a period of I think a few days or a week or something like that of driving, all of that is going to be taken care of in this one video. So let's get started. So we're using the QuickJack 7000 along with 4 jack stands for safety. And I recommend you get the SUV extensions here, those metal pieces you see sticking out, because in the back here you have to get around on the driver's side the air compressor and on the passenger side the fuel tank. So believe it or not, one of the biggest technical challenges is going to be getting a good camera angle where you can still see what I'm doing. So I'm really trying hard to get proper lighting and with the camera in a safe spot. So our heat shield should have 4 8mm bolts on it. I have this extension because 2 of them are on the other side of this cross piece of exhaust. But they look like they've already broken free, so. Oh yeah, that's what I thought. We got some fluid leaking out of there. All right, with the heat shield out of the way, we have the heat shield bracket that we want to remove. That's also got 4 8mm bolts, but they're like underneath this exhaust and they're on the side of it, so it might be easier to use a little box wrench like this one. This is a 5/16, it's the same thing. So let's get in there and start getting these off. All right, quick correction. All 4 bolts are on the sides of the heat shield bracket. I got confused because we only have 3. And a couple of these guys have just been simply torn out of this heat shield. So I'm gonna have to pound this heat shield down or get big washers or something when I put it back in. All right, here's the transmission oil pan. All the way to the rear of this pan, behind this exhaust pipe that's crossing over, is a 10mm Allen wrench plug. So let's pull that guy out. Got a bucket right underneath. I'm just gonna ease it out of there at first. Try not to make too big of a mess. There we go. All right. Oh man. Ooh. It's starting to chug a lug out of there now. Wow. All right. Let's let that do its job. Well, all we got out of there was 3 quarts, and that's even putting in what had dripped on the pan over the last couple weeks. So that could definitely be a reason why the transmission was slipping. There simply isn't enough fluid in there. But let's continue on. All right, there are 21 T40 Torx bits. I've heard that some of them are T30 on some models. Ours happens to be a T40. So the ones along both sides are really easy to get to. The ones underneath this crossbar and that crossbar are almost impossible. So you're gonna need something super low profile like this guy. This is a plastic pan, so these are not torqued very tight at all, and you can get enough leverage with these. You come from what would be the forward side of this one and the aft side of that one, and you get in there and you can just loosen them enough. So I'm going to go around and take all of those out. I'm going to leave the 4 or 5 that are on towards the front and remove all the rest, so the pan starts to lean back like this and all the fluid drains out into the bucket I still have here. So that's the plan. While we're working on getting these rear transmission bolts out, got a great opportunity to look at this transfer case that is sparkling clean. There's no drips or anything on that. It looks in good shape, so that's good news. See if we can break this seal a little bit and start getting a little bit more transmission fluid to come out. There we go. Nice. That gasket wasn't on there very tight. All right, now we're getting a straight up pour, so I'm gonna take my time and let that pour for a bit more. Well, now it's time to cut off that stem from the filter away from the pan so we can rotate the pan and get it out of there. The saw on the bottom is actually made for PVC, so I'm hoping I can just use that one, although that handle might be a bit too big. The one above it is a fine woodworking Japanese handsaw, so I'm kind of hoping I don't have to resort to that one, but I have it if I need it. All right, let's get our bearings. This is the oil pan towards the front of the vehicle. These are the 2 side beams here, and then here's that cross beam, and back here is our the front of our oil pan. So the thing that worked out for me and had the most room was to get the saw right here with the blade heading towards the passenger tire. And from there, I was able to find that plastic and cut through it without much trouble, nor too much damage, it appears, to the teeth. All right, so now we're ready to come over here
And we should be able to rotate this guy out. Wow, that was not easy. You really have to be patient with that.
All right, here's a look at the pan. Disregard all this. This is just the plastic coming off of that neck that we cut off, but you can see the O-ring right here that came out with it. That's good. That means I don't have to get up into the transmission and try to pull that out. Over here are the two magnets, and if we give them a little bit of a wipe, we can see quite a buildup of debris, but I don't see any really significant pieces of metal shavings. So that's good. Just dirty. New gasket lines up with the old pan, so we're in business. All right, next we want to remove the old sealing sleeve. Now this guy is up on the rear passenger side of the transmission, and in here there is a several pin connector that goes on outside, and as you can see here is tightened righty-tighty with a quarter turn. So this is a good picture of what we're looking at from that backside of the transmission, and that flat spot on the connector itself we should be able to grab with a finger in there or a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and we should be able to turn that quarter turn and separate that wire harness. And then at that point on the Mechatronics unit, this white little handle has forks that are holding this piece in like that. We're gonna pull that down, and then this guy should pop out. There's a couple O-rings here, so it's very possible with heat and everything that it's sealed on there pretty good, but we should be able to pry it off, and since we're replacing it, it doesn't matter if it gets messed up.
All right in the center of our screen is that connector right here. Let's see if I can just twist it that quarter turn with my thumb. Oh man. Oh. All right, here we go with the screwdriver. There. Nice. Okay. Let's see if we can pull that guy away now. A little bit more to a turn. There it comes off, see that? Coming out. Now let's pull down this guy. See that? Comes all the way down. And we should be able to get back up here with our screwdriver and pull that guy out.
Finally, time to take out the Mechatronic unit itself. Apparently it's pretty heavy, so once we get most of the screws out, I'm going to need to kind of support it with one hand while I take out the final screws. So you see this wave of torque screws all over, and it looks really confusing and daunting on which ones you're supposed to take out. They make it easy for you. Everything that's a T40 comes out. So I can see by looking at it, this one, this one, this one, these two are all T40, and the other ones are smaller, like 30 or 25, something like that. There are also 3 behind these solenoids, as you can see in this picture. I'm gonna get those first with an extension so that I can concentrate on this field. Also, one of the videos I watched wanted to stress to make sure to take note of this position right here. There is a piece that remains right here that is for the transmission and all the gearing and stuff. And the rest of this is coming out with us. So we want to take a picture of that so that when you put it back together, you know to put it back in the same way. Now, To minimize how much drips on my face, I wiped it down a little bit here and there, but there's still some coming out, and they said expect to have a little bit more come out as you twist it one way or the other. Now these are apparently shorter than the rest of this field, so I'm going to keep these separate. Quite a bit leaking. Yeah, those are a lot longer than the ones in the back. And out it comes. There we go. Wow. Look at all that pouring out of there. So while the Mechatronics unit is out of the way, you can see the 4 cylindrical seals right here, and then the rectangular one right here. So we're going to be replacing all of those. We might as well take care of that right now. So as we look at the 4 replacements, the 2 on the right are the same size, and then you've got a middle-sized one and a long one. So the best thing to do is pull each one out of the transmission one at a time, match up the size, and replace them. All right, let's just go from right to left here. I've got a little pick. It's got a slight little curve on it, just so I can kind of get some grip on this guy and pull him out. Wow, that's tough to get out of there. All right. That looks like one of the short ones. Yep. So, get some lubricant on him. There we go. And just push him right back up there. Now, he doesn't have to seat all the way because, like these others are, because when you torque the Mechatronics unit back down, he'll seat properly. So just go until he stops on his own naturally. All right, number 2. Here it comes. There we go. All right, that looks like another short one. Yep. Rub some of the remaining fluid on him. Push him back in there until he seats. Good. Where'd he go? There we go. All right, he looks like the medium-sized guy. Yep. Right back in he goes, and this should be our real long one. Come on, there we go. And yes, perfect, perfect match. Awesome. Good. All right, now let's pull down this seal. I'm going to wipe the area down a little bit first so I don't get a big drip in my face, but I got to really keep an eye on it so I know the exact orientation. Looks to me it's going to be like that. Yep. Yeah, okay. I'm just lubricating him with all the residual fluid I'm finding. Place him right back into that spot. Good to go. This guy can be the problem with your shifting. So I'm really glad we're changing him out. All right, now let's go back up to the workbench and change out the solenoids. First thing we want to do is separate the hydraulics module that has the solenoids attached to it that we're going to replace with this electronics module that goes all the way around the front and underneath. And to do that, according to the instructions, there are a specific number of these T27 bolts that we need to remove. So they show three separate types of Mechatronics units. One is an E-shift by wire. We don't have that because see this little bar here? That runs wiring back to another solenoid that we don't have. So we don't have that one. Look at this big, huge wire harness going around the all-wheel. We obviously don't have that. Ours is the center one here, the M-shift. So if you look at these green dots, those are the 6 T27 bolts we want to remove. So it's these two, and these two. Now there are two locator dowels that join these two together but are permanently attached to the electronics module. One is right here and one is right here. So we need to push that module out straight so that those don't get bound up. And if we go like this, get my poor little woodworking bench dogs out of the way. There it goes. There we go. Electronics module removed. Next thing we want to do is remove these 9 T27 bolts that are holding a metal plate that keeps the solenoids in place. Oh, that came out easy. We've got 7 solenoids on our particular Mechatronics unit. Some have another 1, 2 more, or some combination thereof. So for ours, everything you see that is green is going to be replaced with blue solenoids, yellow for the yellow, and black for the black. So let's go color by color and start replacing. So these should just pop right out. I've got a little panel removal tool that I think is going to work great for this. There it goes. And the nice thing about these solenoids is they come pre-lubricated, so you don't have to do anything except swap them out and keep the tops and bottoms in the right orientation. We should hear a click here. Ow, that's quite a click, all right. They seem to come out the easiest if I go right on. They seem to come out the easiest if I go right on top with the tool. Go. As I'm looking at the screens on these, I can see some debris all built up on the screens, so. And finally, black for black. Now, if we look at this side of the electronics module, you can see these slots that are going to enter in through the bottom of our solenoids. And the kit came with this little foam piece that's going to fit right onto those. I've got these little bench cookies from woodworking. They're probably pretty upset that they're being repurposed with a bunch of nasty fluid on them, but I want to kind of prop this up just a bit to help me out as I line these two back up on these little pins. I'm lining up our 2 dowels. Ow. All right, I'm paying special attention to this spot right here where this little piston has to grab onto that piece, so we're good there. All right, with that put together, let's get our little rail back on here to hold everybody in place. Yeah, that goes right in. Okay, I got all the screws on this plate hand tight. They need to be torqued to 6 Newton meters. That equates to 4.4 foot-pounds. So I've got my smallest torque wrench here. And I'm not even sure if it's accurate at that low level, but let's give it a try. There we go. All right, to make that easier, I would do that before joining the electronics module back. I was just so worried about this foam pad and lining up this guy, I didn't even think of doing that, but it would be easier first to get around this guy. So same thing with these 6 bolts, 6 Newton meters or 4.4 foot-pounds. And there we go. That was fun. Well, this video just crossed the 30-minute line, so let's talk about some of the major aspects of the reassembly process. So I went in and I reinstalled the Mechatronics unit with the T40 bolts, and those were torqued down to 8 Newton meters, which translates to right around 6 foot-pounds. Then came time to install the sealing sleeve, and that actually has been one of the most difficult parts so far. It can only go in one way. As you can see here, it just lines up on these 3 points, but it goes into the slot just fine, but you have to press it in really hard so that you can push the handle up that has the forks that lock it into place. And it was harder than I was able to do while laying on the floor and using all of my hand strength. So I actually had to slide this breaker bar up in between the rear crossbar and the transmission, get it up in there where it was touching the sealing sleeve, and then use whatever force I could to push it into place, focusing on the lower part of the sealing sleeve. And then I was finally able to push the handle back in. Next, I lubricated and installed the replacement filter. There's a big hole right to the rear of the Mechatronics unit. You can't miss it. It pushes right up in there, and then these prongs you see will tell you when it's centered perfectly. It just kind of slips into place there. Now we're almost ready to put on the new pan, but there are 2 preparatory steps that need to be done before that. First of all, the original pan didn't have a gasket. It actually has this little O-ring, as you can see, going all the way around it. And that allows a tremendous amount of grime, as you see in this picture, to collect on the mating surface for the new gasket and pan. So I went in with a scouring pad and some carburetor cleaner, and I scrubbed that area until it was nice and shiny clean. Now on Atlantic British website and on the instructions that come with the new pan, they make it a point in this highlighted box to say that you need to take an M6 tap and go through all the threads around the perimeter where the bolts are going to secure the pan to the transmission. Interestingly enough, all the bolt holes along the sides of the transmission, as you see here, are open at the top. So any amount of debris can, and has in our case, collected in there. So they want you to take this tap and clean out those threads, because the new bolts are longer and have more what they call engagement. So I found this kit on Amazon, and the length of the actual tap was the perfect size. I was able to get into all of them. However, this handle it came with to twist them doesn't fit in about 90% of the holes. It bangs into the muffler or into the cross bracing. You basically can't use this guy at all. So You have to kind of freeform it this way. Well, next we are ready to prep for replacing the new oil pan. And it comes with this gasket. I originally wanted to use this Permatex brand of gasket maker and just squeeze it all the way around. I thought that would be a really good way to get good adhesion and prevent any possible leaks. Only problem is the tolerances when you're twisting this pan into place are so tight that I'm afraid I'm going to get this all over the bottom of the filter and maybe the Mechatronics unit. So instead I'm going to go with what the Atlantic British video did, which is to use this spray gasket sealant. So I have wiped down with mineral spirits the perimeter of the pan. I'm going to shake and spray this on all the way around. Let that set up a bit, and then I'm going to place the gasket on, being sure to pull it so the holes line up side to side as well as front to rear. It's going to be way too hard to get into these areas on the front and back and try to move the gasket around. It just has to be set in place ahead of time, in my opinion. Once the gasket is all set up in place, I'll go around again and spray the gasket, let that get nice and tacky, and then I'm gonna get underneath the car. I'm gonna set and twist the oil pan into place, put in all the new bolts. They are a metric size 5 Allen wrench. So I have this one that will go into my 3/8 chucked torque wrench, and those need to be torqued down to 10 Newton meters, which equates to about 7.5 pounds. And then I went on the CTSC website and I found this perfect guide for the torque pattern of the bolts. And I printed out this black and white one here, and I'm going to actually tape that to the pan underneath so when I'm torquing I can follow it exactly. I don't expect to be able to get my torque wrench into any of the ones at the either end, so I'm just going to do those by hand. Well, it didn't take long, unfortunately, to realize that that metal pan was not going to fit between the transmission and the 2 cross bars of the frame. So just like the Atlantic British video, I ended up having to jack up the transfer case and the transmission about 1.5 inches or so. So the way you do that is not that tough. I slid in my jack with a couple wooden blocks. I removed the very large 18mm bolt from the transfer case and then simply used my floor jack to jack up the transfer case about 1 inch, 1.5 inches or so, and that gave me enough room down at the transmission area to just get in that pan. And so, in my opinion, since it's pretty much a requirement that you're going to need to do that, you might as well do that in the beginning before you take off the plastic original pan, because it'll just be a lot easier to get your hand in there with the wrenches and sockets and things to remove those end bolts from the pan. Nonetheless, got it in, torqued everything down, and now we are ready to fill the transmission with the ZF fluid. Now, I had to remove the oil fill plug, which, as you can see in this picture, is on the passenger side for us here in America and all the way on the back of the transmission. And that was really tough. I needed a breaker bar with a T50 attachment to get that plug off. So I found this pretty simple fluid siphon or fill device. It comes with these 2 plastic hoses, one of which, as you can see here, I've routed through the frame for stability and to keep it out of the way when we're running the engine. And now I've got the other end right here, and we're going to put that into our first bottle of fluid. Now, supposedly it should take almost 4 of these quarts before we start getting a slight trickle. Then we need to start the engine. Let it warm up to 40 degrees Celsius, which is about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. We're in summertime in Las Vegas, so basically the standing temperature in this garage is almost that. I have a little fan down here if you might be able to hear the noise, just to keep some air circulating because it's hot. But anyway, once we get it up to that temperature, we'll go through all the gears, foot on the brake, still on the lift, just transfer through the gears for 5 seconds each and back to park. And that should cause the transmission to start circulating the fluid through the hoses to the cooler and all that. And then we'll be able to put in another 1 or 2 quarts. So let's see how this guy functions here. You just simply start pumping. Oh yeah. Oh, starting to leak after only 3 quarts. That's interesting. Well, time to fire it up, warm it up, and see how much more we can get in there. All right, I got the GAP tool on live values, and as you can see right here, we are up to transmission oil temp of 40 degrees Celsius, right where we need to be. Let's run through all the gears real quick, and then we'll put more fluid in. So after running through the gears, the transmission ended up taking every bit out of every bottle. And then we finally started getting the mild drip we were looking for. And once that slows down to 1 second or so, we can put the drain plug back in. So this video is now going over 40 minutes. It's time to wrap it up. I put on some gloves that would protect my hands a little bit from the heat when it was time to put back the oil fill plug. It is right near the exhaust pipe, so I wanted to have a little bit of protection, but I found with this extension on my little battery powered ratchet, I was able to very carefully get it in there and without cross threading it, put that oil fill plug on good enough to stop the dripping. And I turn the engine off. Once everything cools off, I'm gonna get down there with a ratchet and tighten up that plug a little bit better. But I found this was a good way to keep my arms away from the hot exhaust. All right, so while I was waiting for the transmission to warm up, I put in the GAP tool and I opened it up and cleared out the adaptations on the transmission we talked about. And as you can see here in my little screen recording, the way you do that is you go into Service/Test, then you touch Transmission, Clear Adaptation Values. It asks you if you want to proceed, you say yes. Then it's going to have you turn off the engine and return the ignition to on. Then as you can see, it went through the process, clearing the faults, and Operation Succeed. Now over the next several weeks, as the computer is learning how to properly shift the transmission now that it's been fully serviced, I'm going to be driving it like a grandma, just kind of around town driving, nothing really getting on, no heavy acceleration, no pulling any trailers, climbing up the mountain to Mount Charleston, anything like that, just kind of around town driving to let the computer start to learn again the proper way to shift it. As soon as the engine cools down and I check for leaks, I'm going to put the bracket and the heat shield back onto the transmission so that it can be protected from that exhaust pipe. Now, if you're still with me on a video this long, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. You are awesome. If you found this video helpful, will you please give it a thumbs up? I think it really helps the algorithms to start suggesting it to more people like you. And thank you to everyone that's been doing that in the past videos. I'm going to leave links for practically everything I talked about in this episode. Full disclosure, many of those will be Amazon affiliate links. So if you click on them, end up making a purchase. It won't cost you a thing, but I do get a small reward at the end of the month. And I would really appreciate you using those links. This was a long, involved learning process for me, and I've tried to condense it down in the most consumable way for you. And I'd love it if you could reward me with a few clicks on my links. Please leave some comments below. I read all comments and respond to them. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I'm also going to leave links to all the original source materials that I used, i.e. the videos that I found to make this video. So you're welcome to back up what I'm telling you with those videos that I learned from as well. Now I want nothing more than for Aspen and I to take a drive in this and see how the transmission works, but we still have to deal with the suspension faults that we're getting and the suspension being bottomed out on the bump stops before we can go anywhere. So that is going to be our next video. Until then, thank you for watching.